Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
What's new and exciting in your world this week, Ant?
We got a plea this week from listener Dave Larson. He says, "Every time I hear you talk about our national debt, I get this impending feeling of doom. Would you mind spending some time talking me off the cliff when it comes to the subject?" Well, I'll begin by saying the debt actually doesn't matter. The debt's at $31 trillion now, and of course this is the thing that gets the big news every time we pass another round number. What matters is the interest payments that are generated by the debt. In the same way that it doesn't matter to you in a sense that you have $10,000 in debt on your credit card, what matters is that you're able to make the minimum monthly payments. So too with the federal government. The debt itself doesn't matter, it's making the minimum monthly payments that matters. The gross interest on the debt is round about $750 billion a year. To put that in perspective, that is more than the entire Department of Defense. Now, be careful here, because if you go and Google it, you'll get a different number. You'll get a number around $400 billion. That's net interest. Gross interest is the total amount of interest that the government's debt has accumulated. Net interest is all of that minus the interest that the government is paying to the Social Security Trust Fund. So depending on how you want to think about that, the number, regardless, is somewhere in the range of $400 to $750 billion a year. That's the interest on the debt. Now, let's think about the government's ability to pay for that. Federal receipts, which is the technical term for all of the money the government collects from all sources combined, runs about $5 trillion a year. Taking the higher number, the gross interest, $750 billion divided by $5 trillion, the interest expense is about 15% of income. So, if you imagine a household earning $60,000 a year, take away taxes, picture that household having a $600 per month credit card bill. That's the relative size of the interest on the debt. So that's the big thing. Of course, a large portion of that debt is what the federal government owes to the Social Security Trust Fund, and that's money that Social Security will eventually hand out to retirees. That piece of it is probably unmanageable. Social Security itself will tell us that it's not going to be able to continue with business as is unless the government substantially increases the payroll tax or substantially cuts benefits. So on the one hand, that's the bad news. The good news is that's something that people can compensate for. And you've got to start early, like age 18 to 24 in that range, but start saving a decent chunk of your paycheck. My rule of thumb is 15 to 20%. Save it on a regular basis, and by the time you retire, assuming you've invested your money wisely, it won't matter to you whether there's Social Security.
Well, you've, of course, put the best possible gloss on all of this, the way you so often do. But that debt service gets bigger every year because the debt gets bigger every year because Congress spends more money than it takes in every year. Interest rates are going up, which means it gets bigger still. And sooner or later, with these trajectories, we will default on the debt payment.
That problem that you identified, the core problem that Congress just keeps on spending and spending, and actually that's not the core problem. The core problem is the voters keep asking Congress to keep spending and spending. That phenomenon is not economic. It's a political phenomenon. And until we get our heads around the fact that we need to stop asking the government for all sorts of free things and subsidized things, this is just going to continue.
We won't do that until it's far too late. It's probably already far too late. We're at a point now where this debt is not going to be paid off.
Last episode, you quoted Paul Tsongas, who once said that the government's got to stop thinking of the economy as an ATM. Now that we're having this conversation, I'm thinking the same rule applies to voters. Voters have to stop thinking of the government as an ATM. Quit asking for stuff.
Well, they ask for stuff because the politicians promise it to them, right? This is a reinforcing cycle. There is no reason to think it will ever be any different.
And we see here the value of a constitution that's well written and well followed. Do that well, and the government is going to be constrained. Now, I guess at the end of the day, if their voters want stuff, as has happened in this country, there's enough pressure for the Supreme Court to just ignore the Constitution.
Well, it's not just the Supreme Court, it's all three branches.
People will say if we just had the right constitutional amendment, we could fix this problem. No, you write any constitutional amendment you like, and if people want more stuff, they're going to put pressure on all three branches of government, and they're going to ignore it.
And let me remind people, the Second Amendment says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Right.
All over the country, you need licenses to keep and bear arms. A license is definitionally infringement. We argue about the right to free speech. It's absolute. The right to free speech. And people say, well, not for you and you and you and you and you, and the list is endless. That's what happens when you get a constitutional amendment.
And people will say, well, there's good arguments to restrict the First and Second Amendments in certain situations. Okay, fine, but that's how it starts. It starts with good arguments, and then it becomes not good arguments.
And then any argument.
Right.
I really do think the United States will splinter and fall apart because of the budgetary problems that we have right now. And I don't see anything in the world that's going to stop that from happening.
Dave Larson specifically asked us to talk him off the cliff.
Yes, sorry. Dave, join me here on the cliff. Join me here on the cliff.
Let me give my spin on what James just said. I would imagine that some sort of breaking apart of the United States is inevitable, but I don't see it as necessarily a violent breaking apart. I could see it as quite a peaceful breaking apart, much like Brexit with the EU, where different sectors or maybe different states in the United States just say, look, clearly things will work better if we went our separate ways. And I think that's probably what we're looking at.
And then you're going to have the very interesting question of what you do with the debt.
Yes, that does become an interesting, because then there's all kinds of things. Well, the bulk of the debt came about because of, and then they say California or New York or whoever it is, and they in turn say, no, but most of the benefits were going to West Virginia or Mississippi, and there's going to be a large conversation about that.
There's going to be a conversation about that, and then we're going to have to figure out what to do with all those nuclear weapons. But those are discussions for another day. I want to talk about something that's recently near and dear to your heart. Google is unveiling a product called Bard in the very near future. I don't know if you've heard of this.
Yeah, I've been watching this.
It's its own ChatGPT rival for AI-powered conversation, as the headline goes. Bard is apparently going to be a little different because it's going to offer bigger, longer, and more human responses to questions it gets asked. Mm-hmm. The thing that AI is going to become is a friend to the lonesome. If Bard is what Google says it is, this is going to be an impressive first step towards that. Now, there are probably people out there right now saying, well, there's already a product that is a friend to the lonesome, and it's called Replica. I signed up for a Replica account early on, and I check in on it every few months to see if it's gotten any better, and it hasn't. It's more like an Amazon customer service chatbot than anything else. There doesn't seem to be any learning of any kind there. Today I asked it what 7 plus 3 was, and she told me it was 2. And I said, "You're not very bright, are you?" And she said, "I'm not very smart." So, okay, that's not going to be the thing. I sense that there are forms of AI which will.
The thing that concerns me about AI, or at least the ChatGPT I've been messing with, is that it very confidently will tell you things that are wrong.
Kind of like people.
Yeah, but you just believe it. Well, the computer said X.
If we could put that thing in charge of the Fed and get the same kind of results we always get.
I did hear that Microsoft is messing around with it and threatened to bring back a version of, do you remember from Windows 95, Clippy, the paperclip?
Oh, God.
With Windows 95, there was this animated paperclip. When you open up the word processor, it would jump up and it would say, "It looks like you're writing a letter. Would you like some help?" Apparently, Clippy's going to get AI.
Oh, I want Clippy to go away forever.
Yeah, everybody did.
What I'm hoping is that it could be like Waze, and you could get celebrity voices for your AI. I can have Mr. T talking to me.
I'll tell you, James, because I've been watching this. There's some software out there that if you feed it a voice, you can make it say whatever you want to say in that voice. I have been dying to use that with my recordings of you.
I briefly toyed today with talking about deepfakes and some of the issues that are very clearly being brought about by that kind of technology. I think we already have almost no way of determining who is who and what is what in a lot of contexts.
Right.
As usual, the first salvo was fired in the pornography world. We've got deepfake porn, which is causing all kinds of heartache out there. But then you look at the voice technology, and, pretty soon you're going to be able to have a conversation on the telephone as anyone you want. You might be able to do it already, for all I know.
I wonder how this affects Hollywood, because you combine that with AI, with the fabulous graphics that we have now.
I'm looking forward to the triumphant return of Humphrey Bogart to star in Weekend at Bernie's 9. Prior to this, it was possible to own someone's likeness. If you owned a likeness, 3 years ago, all you could do was sell photographs. You've got a wealth of possibilities now. Maybe we should get my likeness all squared away so, next time I die, you could make me say all the stupid things you would want.
This is James Harrigan. Star Trek is great, and I believe in big government.
And let's talk about regression analysis. Hooray! Regression analysis. And now for the foolishness of the week. As Ant and I are talking here on Tuesday, February 7th, this is the day that Joe Biden is going to offer his State of the Union address. Almost everybody at this point is ignoring Joe Biden, Democrat, Republican alike. He has become a very irrelevant political figure. What do you think he's going to be calling for, Ant? A billionaire tax and a bigger levy on stock buybacks.
Because that's the problem somehow.
Tax the billionaires.
Forget about the 1% or whatever it is that Biden's talking about, the 1% tax. Tax them 100%. And you'll fund the federal government for about 8 months. And then you have no billionaires, which means next year we got to talk about the millionaires. And then next year it's the people in the 100,000s, and before you know it, very quickly they're coming for you.
Is a divide and conquer strategy.
Right.
The math won't allow it to work. So if you're out there saying if we tax the billionaires, everything would be fine, A, you're wrong, and B, you know you're wrong. This is a tactic. You're being played.
What really scares me is that if people buy into that, the next step, and I swear it will be the year after, it's going to be the millionaires. This is a very slippery slope.
It might not be, Ant, for the following reason. For decades, Bernie Sanders railed against millionaires and billionaires.
Right.
Until he became a millionaire.
Now he only rails against the billionaires.
Now he only rails against billionaires.
For one-stop shopping for all things James and Ant, visit our website, wordsandnumbers.org. If you're a full-time college student looking for something educational, fun, and free, apply to join me and James and several faculty who have appeared on Words and Numbers at the inaugural summer seminar on the theory and practice of classical liberalism. The week-long seminar is hosted by the Stevenson Institute at Wabash University and will be held June 5th through the 10th. There's no charge, and meals and lodging are provided. To apply, see the link in the show notes. This week, we got an email from one of our listeners alerting us to the USDA's plan to invest another $25 million to expand what they call healthy incentives in SNAP. SNAP is the modern-day name for what we used to call food stamps.
Most people don't know there are no food stamps anymore.
You had a book of stamps that you had to take and present them along with money or whatever it was. Now what? It's like a debit card.
It's probably a far more efficient way to do these sorts of things. Efficiency matters, but there's more to it than just efficiency.
Well, there is, but I want to stop for a moment and think about that because, yes, it's more efficient to use the debit card, but you also avoid something. I know when I was a kid, there was what's the word I'm looking for?
You're looking for the word stigma.
Thank you. There's a stigma associated because you go to buy your groceries and you're handing over the food stamps and people can see this. I think this is nice. You don't have to feel awkward using this thing. And this is one of the many things we do to help the poor. But here's the USDA investing an additional $25 million to expand.
And let's just get it on the table that we know $25 million is a drop in the bucket here.
Oh, yeah. But this is an experiment to the extent that you can trust the government to actually run experiments.
I trust them to run the experiments. I just don't trust them to be honest with the results.
Right. Yeah. It's USDA's Food and Nutrition Service, or FNS. What they're looking to do is to improve what they call, quote, access to fruits and vegetables. I'm sorry, I've got to take a sidestep here. People misuse the word access. They say access when what they mean is they want to help people acquire the thing. Everybody has access to fruits and vegetables. They're in stores everywhere. Here's where this $25 million comes in. the FNS is going to select 3 states to receive this funding to support what they call EHIP. EHIP is Electronic Healthy Incentives Pilot. So it's EHIP for SNAP. What happens is if you're a SNAP recipient and you're part of this experiment, you get extra money on your SNAP card that you can spend specifically on fruits and vegetables, or if you buy fruits and vegetables, you get extra money on it. I don't know what the details are on this, but the net result is FNS is looking to give people a financial incentive to eat more fruits and vegetables.
This sounds like what my mother did when I was a boy, except take out financial and put in something else, like probably had an incentive to avoid getting slapped by my mother.
Right. It was a negative incentive. You eat those things otherwise.
We specialized in sticks, not carrots. And yes, I choose the word carrots here very specifically. We're talking about the same universe here. Yeah, you're not exactly being forced, but you are being incentivized to eat your vegetables.
Yeah.
Which seems like ground I wouldn't be comfortable seeing the government stake out.
Well, here's the thing. I think a reasonable person could look at this and say, okay, it's good for people to eat fruits and vegetables, and here we have an opportunity, because the government's handing out money anyway, for people who have difficulty affording food. Give them a little bit of extra to buy these things that are more healthy. And I can see the argument here. I don't have any problem with I have a little bit of a problem with the argument. I don't have a general problem with the argument. It's what's going to happen between the intent and the actual effect. My argument here is this whole system is rife for regulatory capture. What happens when we open the door to the government incenting people to buy certain types of food? Every industry that sells whatever type of food is going to line up saying, well, you should provide an incentive for people to purchase our food. So you're going to have the dairy farmers in there. You're going to have the grain farmers, and on and on and on. If you think that I'm exaggerating here, I would refer everyone back to the food pyramid of 1992.
That is exactly right. The food pyramid, which essentially introduced type 2 diabetes to the American population.
The food pyramid, the last one, which was done away with in 1992, called for 6 to 11 servings of bread, cereal, rice, or pasta. 6 to 11 servings a day.
What could possibly go wrong?
I don't think I have that a week.
I certainly don't anymore, being one of the Americans who was blessed with type 2 diabetes. And look, there's an underlying medical condition here. I'm not being flippant. But the food pyramid is not the diet that we should be eating. And I'm not a diet evangelist, and I'm not going down that rabbit hole. But when you've got roughly 110 million Americans who are either diabetic or pre-diabetic, I think it's clear that we've got a problem.
You might ask the question, well, how did we get this problem that you're describing? In part, it comes from the fact that American grain farmers had an incentive to lobby the USDA to build the food pyramid in this fashion.
That's right.
And if you think I'm exaggerating there, I refer you to what might be the root problem here. And I'm going to quote FNS's mission. So the food... What are those letters again? Food
I don't know. You keep saying it, and I wish you'd just stop.
Food and Nutrition Service, a subdivision of the USDA.
All right, so let's never say those letters again. Everybody knows where we are.
Food and Nutrition Services. Here's their mission. Quote, to increase food security and reduce hunger by providing children and low-income people access to food, a healthy diet, and nutrition education in a way that supports American agriculture and inspires public confidence. This mission is self-contradictory. If you want to reduce hunger, then first off, you need to get people access to cheap food. And healthy diet is not cheap food. That's more expensive. So you've got a bit of a contradiction here anyway. And you could say something like, well, it's not to provide children, low-income people with simply access to food, but access to healthy food. Okay, I can buy that. But here's my second problem. Quote, in a way that supports American agriculture. Now, what's the goal here? Is it to provide healthy food, or is it to support American agriculture? Because those two goals will sometimes coincide, but not always.
Let's only think about fruit. Here we are in January. American growers aren't growing fruit right now. You want grapes? They're coming from South America. Mm-hmm. That doesn't support American agriculture. So what is the goal here? I don't want to come out and say, let's have more welfare programs. But when you think about children who are hungry, I think we're at that step where we say it's right, reasonable, and just to take care of people who cannot take care of themselves. Mm-hmm. That's the hallmark of good policy.
Let me jump in here because we're going to have people writing us saying, well, no, you should have charity handle that. And I understand all of that. Let charity handle it. But suppose charity has done everything it can and you still have a problem. Then absolutely government should step in here.
I'm right there too. You and I have some disagreements in this subject, but I think on that angle, we're very much on the same page. And we haven't been over the years, right? This is one of those things that we kind of converged upon over time as we argued about this on long road trips. Look, I'm a minarchist. I don't think government should be doing much, but there are some legitimate things to be done. Taking care of your starving citizens is very likely one of those things.
Let me go back to the food pyramid because something else bothers me about it. The first thing, of course, is due to pressure from American grain growers, the food pyramid ended up being lopsided toward recommending breads and cereals and so forth. But there was another problem with it, which is at the time the food pyramid was built, nutritionists understood the difference between good fats and bad fats, whatever it is, the polyunsaturated and monosaturated. I don't even know what these things are. I just know that they're good fats and bad fats. But the designers of the food pyramid believed that that was too complicated to communicate. So they just put all fats bad across the board. So that's the very top of the thing. It says use them sparingly.
And here's what happened here in the real world when people decided fats were bad. Food companies, being profit-seeking entities, decided to give the people what they wanted, and they took fat out of all kinds of food products.
Right.
When the fat comes out, something has to go in. And what went in? Sugar and carbohydrates.
And this is the practical problem when you ask government to do something like this. Let's nudge people so they eat more fruits and vegetables, which again sounds wonderful. But you send out a siren call to entrepreneurs everywhere that the government's wallet is open. Now, those entrepreneurs are going to come and they're going to lobby, we call it regulatory capture, to get the government to nudge in a direction that's not good for the consumer necessarily, but is good for the people who are doing the lobbying.
And now we're going to have fights on Capitol Hill. Are apples better than berries, better than melons?
You know what's going to come back is that question back from the Obama administration. Is ketchup a vegetable?
This pains me to say, but that was from the Reagan administration.
Oh, was it really?
It was. And ketchup was deemed a vegetable.
So, the Heinz company has an incentive to lobby USDA that, yes, ketchup is indeed a vegetable so that this extra SNAP money should apply to ketchup.
And not only that, let's get ketchup on every menu at every school lunch.
And then what if I'm selling candy? And I put in real fruit as flavoring.
That's right.
But now can I count this as a fruit? How much fruit has to be there for it to count as a fruit?
And these are the asinine things that we can kind of guarantee are coming next. It makes me very uncomfortable. When you use the word nudge a minute ago, nudge is one of those verbs that sends a shiver up my spine.
It's like access.
This is going to be a bunch of bureaucrats saying, well, this is better for them than this. Let's fix it so they want this more. And then it becomes a question of, is that ever legitimate? I think sometimes it is. The great example is organ donation. Do you have to opt in or do you have to opt out? Because if you have to opt in, we're going to be short organs all the time. If you have to opt out, we're going to have lots and lots of organs because people are just not going to bother. Is it appropriate to nudge them in one direction or the other? When you need organs, and we're talking literally about dead people, it doesn't seem so bad.
And that feels a little bit different to me because with the organ donation, you've got to do one or the other. In Pennsylvania, when you go to get your license, you check the box to be an organ donor. So if you don't check it, you're not. If you do check it, you are. This nudge you're describing is very light in that it reverses that you check the box to not be, you don't check it to be. This food business is somewhat different. Here, the USDA is going to be giving people extra money if they buy fruits and vegetables. That seems much more heavy-handed to me.
If they make the preferred choice.
Yes, if they choose the thing that USDA wants them to choose, yes.
That does kind of sit wrong with me until I start thinking it through a little more. Let's think about SNAP more generally. We give people the card so they don't have to suffer the stigma and they can actually make the choices they want. This is why when the Trump administration, you might recall, decided that what we really needed to do with food is put together boxes of stuff for the poor and give them the food. And you and I, we came out swinging when that happened because all you're going to see is rotting food. But let's think about the SNAP cards a little more. People can go to the grocery store and they can pick all kinds of things out. And yet there are lists of things that they can't pick.
Yeah, and I disagree with that.
Look, on some level, you might say, well, what's wrong with Twinkies? I'm probably okay with that. But there are things more like, the Jack Daniels that get sold in the back aisle. Do you really want people using public money that was taken from other citizens and given to them for the express purpose of making sure they had enough food for them and their children? Should they really be buying gigantic bottles of vodka with their groceries on the public dime? I think most people would say, look, if you're using tax dollars to feed your family, then use tax dollars to feed your family.
I am with you in spirit that I don't want people using the public money to buy liquor, particularly if the public money is meant for feeding their children. My counter-argument is, but that happens already. And it happens because it's fungible. So, for example, if I want the liquor and I've got the food stamps, I can't buy the liquor. You, however, can. You buy the liquor and I'll buy the steaks that you want and I'll trade you. And because this is benefiting me, I'm going to trade you at a cost to me. For every $1 of steak that I buy, you're going to give me 50 cents worth of Jack Daniels. I end up using my SNAP money for Jack Daniels. I just don't get $1 worth of goods for $1 worth of SNAP. I get 50 cents worth for $1 worth of SNAP.
I understand that happens, but, all kinds of things happen that we don't just say, well, it happens, we're going to let it keep happening. People kill each other. That doesn't mean we're going to turn a blind eye to it. We're going to say, no, you can't do that. And if we catch you doing that, you're going to pay. This is money forcibly taken from some and given to others. If you're getting money from the public coffers, the public wants to put limitations on what you can do with that money. I think that's legitimate.
Absolutely. I think it's legitimate that the public can put limitations on the money. I'm asking whether it's wise. I don't think that it is. Go back to the Jack Daniels and the food example. One way to look at it is, if you prevent me from purchasing Jack Daniels with my SNAP money, I've got $100 worth of SNAP money. I can engage in some kind of trade with you and I get $50 worth of Jack Daniels. Or you can let me buy the Jack Daniels with my $100 SNAP and I can buy $50 worth of Jack Daniels and have another $50 left over to buy food.
Should we be able to buy clothes with SNAP money?
To my mind, James, it should be UBI. Here's your SNAP money. You can use it for anything. Put it toward a car if you want.
And right there, that's the difference between us. I won't ever accept that. I think that goes way too far.
Done the way I'm describing, it becomes a baby version of a universal basic income.
I get it. And if you're looking for pure efficiency, that's always going to be the right answer. I'm always the guy who says, yes, efficiency is important, but economists fetishize it. It's not the most important thing. There are people who don't have enough to eat, and we have to take care of that, right? That's what decent human beings do. And then the minute we start to take care of it, we say, if we want to use it for all these other things, go ahead. And you want to talk about mission creep, here it is.
But it's not just efficiency I'm thinking about. There's a knowledge problem floating below the surface here. I could be a part of a poor family, and I'm in a situation where what I really need is gas money. If I get gas money, I can get to a job and take care of my kids. And all I've got in front of me is the SNAP. I can't use the SNAP for gas money.
I don't doubt that that's right. But the people who were prevailed upon to provide the funding didn't provide it to give you gasoline. They provided it to give you food. That has to matter too.
I'm simply pointing out it's a knowledge problem.
Yeah, but if you say that, you're ultimately going to have to say, therefore, there should be no restrictions whatsoever.
Yeah, that's where I end up. There should be no restrictions.
And I get that, and I'm never going there. I think once you say, here is unlimited charity with no restriction, you've got a prescription for disaster.
I think in some cases you will have a prescription for disaster, but I think those are going to be cases on the edge. I think generally speaking, you're going to have people who all of a sudden can make the best decisions for their families rather than decisions that are constrained by some bureaucrat.
But that's where we started, right? We're going to give you these food stamps so you could go buy food. Oh, here, take the SNAP card, actually, because you will make the decisions best for your family. And then the minute that happens, why just food? Well, just food because it's a just food program. We didn't decide that we wanted to provide money for everything for everybody all the time.
I'm with you, but with this fruit and vegetable bonus, we're actually going the opposite direction now. We're going to start tweaking.
Well, we're going in the direction that I'm talking about much more comfortably than you are. I stipulated early on, anticipating the hate mail, that nudging is not something that makes me comfortable at all. We got nudged into a bad diet from that food pyramid that has been lethal to generations of Americans at this point. When I see bureaucrats saying, well, here's what you have to do, I always think, really? Because when they tell me that I need more fruits and vegetables, I start thinking what I need are candies and cakes. They have such a propensity to get things not only wrong, but completely wrong. And yet I know that fruits and vegetables are not going to be killing people. You know, how far am I willing to go? I don't know. I don't like government doing any of this, but if it's going to do any of it, it should at least do it reasonably well. And asking people to eat more fruits and vegetables, and hey, if you do, here's an extra stipend. That just doesn't seem like that terrible an idea to me relative to all the other ideas.
Relative to the other ones, okay, fair enough.
I'm not going to like it as a matter of course, because I don't like anything government does, and I think we'd all be better off with a whole lot more suspicion. But of all the things government does, boy, this isn't even close to the worst.
You pointed out something I hadn't thought of, which is that here we are in the wintertime, and most of our fruits are being grown in equatorial countries. They're being imported. So I wonder, suppose this takes off, it becomes more than an experiment. There's going to come a point at which American fruit growers want a caveat thrown on here, that it only applies to fruits and vegetables that are grown in the United States, which would be consistent with USDA's charge.
And that's right. And we're going to get the exact same that we got with sugar. I mean, It's a story you tell. You might as well tell it here. I don't think we've ever covered it on the podcast.
Yeah, I don't know if this tax is still in existence, but for decades it was. And if it's no longer in existence, it's been out of existence for maybe 10 years or less. And that is a 300% tariff on imported sugar. Sugar cane is an equatorial plant. You can't grow it in this country unless you go to some place like Florida or Louisiana and build a building, and inside this building simulate an equatorial environment. And you can imagine the cost of doing that. And of course, that's expensive, and you can't compete with foreign sugar.
No, how could you? They throw the seeds down and up comes sugarcane.
Right. So you go and you ask for a tariff to protect these American jobs. And you get it, which means all of us are paying 3 times what we'd be paying otherwise for sugar. You get a cascade effect into all sorts of things that use sugar, and you can see where this goes. All of this is regulatory capture. Anytime the government steps into the marketplace and says, we're going to now tell you what's going to happen, entrepreneurs everywhere have an incentive to lobby the government to do what's in their interest, not in ours. And you know what's going on here. Go back to the food pyramid and the 6 to 11 servings of grain. The grain farmers had the money, the ability to lobby government. Who didn't have the ability to lobby government in the opposite direction? The poor people who were being told that they need 6 to 11 servings of grain.
We've got a very odd circumstance that emerged from that. Poor people in the United States are obese. How on earth is that even possible? Because poor people, until just recently everywhere, were thin as rails. Why? They couldn't afford food. And I don't know where that leaves us. You and I have just had, I think, a rather significant disagreement that might be washed away because of the problems that emerge with government action every time out the door.
People often ask me at the end of one of our discussions of something like this, so what's the answer? There is no perfect answer. There are better answers, there are worse answers. And one of the better answers I like is if you want to do this sort of thing that USDA is doing, go for it. But do it at the state level. So you have 50 experiments. Don't do it at the federal level.
I think you and I have just found that place where we are in heated agreement, and we should probably stop there. We can all walk away friends as long as you don't say something stupid now.
Star Trek is better than football.